I'm going to go ahead and talk about browns, mixing different browns with acrylic paint. And so let's talk very briefly about some supplies you're going to need. So first things first, you will need all three of your primary colors, so red and yellow and blue, and acrylic paint from your art kit. You will need your plastic paint palette, so I hope that yours is cleaned out a little bit better than mine. Mine is very old. Glass of water, cup of water, your paintbrushes. I think smaller is better for this. Paper towel just to blot off any excess water as you rinse your paintbrushes. Paper and also a pencil and something to trace around. Okay, so let's very briefly just talk about how to set up your paper here. So today we're going to be working with mixing browns. Okay, and what I have done here is, and I drew this lightly, I apologize, and the lighting's not good, but I have traced just my little sharpener here. So anything that is small, keyword being small, that you can use as a template to trace around would be good. So just kind of look around your house for something. But I've created 4 different sections for me to fill in, and I've labeled it with browns here. And I labeled this kind of awkwardly, and I will explain why as we go. So this first box I have written red brown. The second one I have written brown equal. The third one I have written yellow brown, and the third one I have labeled as blue brown. Okay, which this sounds like really messed up, but again, I think it may make sense as we go through this. Okay, so you're gonna set up your paper that way. Now, really quickly, before we set up our paint palette, let's talk about acrylic paints. So as I've mentioned before in previous videos, these paints are permanent. What that means is it will wash off your hands if it gets on your clothing, the surface that you are working on, or if you leave it overnight in your paint palette or in your paint brushes, it will ruin them. Okay, so at the end of this demonstration, if you're done with painting, please take the time to wash your paintbrushes with soap and water, use a sponge, really wash out your paint palette so it doesn't look like mine right here. Now, what we're going to go ahead and do, and this part here is a little bit harder. So before we set up our paint palette, let's talk about the color brown. So the color brown is achieved by mixing all 3 primaries together. Okay, so you're gonna mix yellow, blue, and red together to create a brown. Okay, you may have also heard that if you mix complementary colors on the color wheel together, that so colors that are dead across from one another, straight across the color wheel from one another, that's a way of also mixing a brown. That is totally true. If you were to use that advice, for example, red and green are across the color wheel from one another. They are complementary colors. I have my red here, and guess what? These 2 colors together make green. Okay, so either think of it as the 3 primaries, or think of it as, complements across the color wheel from one another, mixing them together, but it's literally the same thing. Okay, so now, for the reason why we're mixing browns anyway is because a lot of your animals for your paper mache animal masks do involve a brown of some kind. All right, so mixing them is going to be important. And believe it or not, there's many different types of brown. Okay, so it's like, okay, well, what do I put in my paint palette? I know I have to, mix all 3 of these together, but the question becomes, how much and what type of brown you're wanting to achieve. So in one creator of my paint palette, what I'm going to do is I'm going to combine all 3 of these colors, and I am going to attempt to have a little bit more red than the yellow and the blue to see if I can mix a red brown. This one I'm going to try and make as best I can. This one's going to be very hard. All 3 parts equal. This one I'm going to have a little bit more yellow than blue and red. And this one I'm going to have a little bit more blue than the yellow and the red. Okay, so just thinking about it in different ways. Now, I'm going to do this. I'm going to be daring this morning, and I am going to try and create blobs in each crater that match what I'm trying to achieve right here. So for my red brown, I know I want more red than yellow and blue. And again, I don't want to squirt out too much paint for this because this is not my project. This is just an exercise. And look, see, I didn't even clean up my workspace and now I got acrylic paint all over my table. Shh, that's not good, all right? So if that dries, I'm toast. Okay, so I gotta clean that up. I gotta hurry up. All right, so I'm gonna go ahead and do a little squirt of red. Okay, I'm gonna keep this small. So this, again, less than dime size. Something weird's happening with my red. Gross. Sorry, y'all. I don't know what's going on with that. Okay, I have my red. I'm going to do a much smaller, much smaller glob of yellow. And I'm going to try and keep my yellow glob equal to my blue glob. Okay, so see how the yellow glob is smaller? Okay. So I have that one. That one's going to be my red brown. For this next crater, I'm going to try and squeeze a little bit of all three. Okay, so about the same amount of all three. So let's see. 1, 2. Yeah, that's looking good so far. And let's see if I can get this red to come out. This red's being a little weird. Okay. That may be too much red. I'm not sure. Okay, so that one I'm trying to create even, and this doesn't have to be exact, it just is to give you guys an idea. For the yellow one, I'm going to make sure my yellow is a little bit more. So yellow, I'll have a little bit more of that. And then adding a small equal amounts, I'm going to try for equal amounts of red and blue. And for my last one, my blue brown, I just kind of made that up. I'm calling it blue brown. It's actually like a cooler brown color. Okay, so the blue, see how the blue glob is a little bit larger, and then small glob of yellow, small glob of red. And again, even with the 3 globs in each of these, I've still tried to keep my amount that I'm squirting out small. Okay, there we go. All right. Now, let's say you squirt these out and they're out of order from what I did here. That's fine. Just plug them in on your sheet where you think that they go, okay? So right now, let's mix these together and see what happens, okay? So I am actually going to start real quick. I think I'm going to start with my brown equal parts one, just to give you an idea of what it looks like when you mix it, okay? So, and again, mix this as thoroughly as possible, y'all, because otherwise it's going to look kind of weird. All right. So this is my brown that I have mixed with equal parts. Okay. So I tried to keep this as equal as possible. I'm going to apply it right here. This is a great brown. And we'll see how it compares to the other ones in just a moment. So that's my equal parts one. Now I'm gonna, just to give you an idea of what like a brown should look like. All right, now I'm gonna mix the one that is heavy on the red. Let's see what it looks like. It should in theory be warmer or more red than the other brown. And it looks like it is. And again, mix it thoroughly. Okay, and apply it. Here we go. All right, so it's a little bit warmer than that brown, right? All right, let's go to the yellow brown. Let's see what it looks like. And again, it sort of looks a little bit barf-like when you start to mix it because you're creating a neutral color, right? So mix it thoroughly until it's not swirly anymore. Aha. All right, so look at this one. This one's completely different than the other two. So this is my yellow brown, right? And as you're doing this, you may be thinking of how you can use this within, or like what type of brown you may need for what it is you're doing. And then last but not least, we have, yep, that one's completely different than the other ones. We also have our blue brown, right? So that should be our darkest one. And you'll notice this kind of looks, it kind of has a greenish tint when you first kind of mix it together. All right, let me mix this thoroughly. Mix, mix, mix. If it looks swirly and awesome, do not apply it. Keep mixing. Okay, completely different brown, right? Now for kicks, in the last video, I'm going to do 2 more things now that I think about it. Now that I have these browns here, experiment with this. So I have 4 completely different browns. I have the equal part, one that leans heavily toward red, one that leans toward yellow, one that leans towards blue. Let's say you mix it together and you're like, okay, this one looks the same as this one. Add more of what it's supposed to be a little bit heavier in, okay? So if this isn't blue enough or it doesn't have enough blue in it, add some more blue to make it a little bit darker than some of these other ones. Does that make sense? So, you know, if you mix it and it's not quite right, add more of the color that is supposed to kind of be a little bit more, supposed to have a little bit more of it. Now, what I'm going to go ahead and do here, just for fun, is I'm going to make a tint of brown and a shade of brown. Okay, so I'm going to use one of these browns. Oops, wrong thing. One of these browns and make it lighter or darker. Okay, just for kicks. Last video, we talked about tints and shades of a color. Okay, so what I'm going to do here is let's say I want to make this one here lighter. Okay, so I'm going to add a smidgen of this to here. And you can see I have this really nice, kind of almost like a skin tone color here. Let's say I want to make it a little bit darker. I'm going to grab another smidge. Okay, but this kind of gives you an idea of how you can create a tint of brown. Okay, and I always start with the lighter colors of the base and mix the darker one in, just so that I can control the color. So you've got a really nice skin tone there if you need it by creating a tint of brown, right? Let's see if we can go for a shade of brown. All right, so I am going to make one of these a little bit darker. Let's say I want to make this regular brown a little bit darker. Smidgen of black, mix it in. That was more than a smidgen, sorry y'all. But you can see how it makes a much darker version of that brown, right? It deepens that tone greatly. Okay, so very, very, very deep, deep, deep brown. And again, I kind of globbed that black in there. If I had been a little bit more smidgen-like, added a smidgen, it would have been a lot lighter, but I wanted to create something deep for y'all to see. Okay, so when you are done with this, I do want you to spend some time, wash this out with soap and water, brushes, soap and water here, so that acrylic paint does not dry in your paint brushes or your paint palette.